I hate all of this. I hate all of it. It was all Man, am I in the shadow here? I'm in a friggin' shadow. God. Shadow. Everyone, thanks for joining me today. I just want to make a quick video about some ice fishing equipment that you must have and some ice fishing equipment that's nice to have if you are new to ice fishing or just wondering if there's some other equipment out there that you may need and you've got some experience. I get asked from time to time from people who either haven't done it before or want to get into it, and just thought I'd make a video on some of the stuff that I think you have to have and some equipment that is nice to have. So let's get started. So the first thing you're going to need, one of the must-haves, is an ice fishing rod. So you'll notice, if anybody's not too familiar with ice fishing, that the rods are usually shorter than what you would see on an open water rod. We could spend several videos going over all the different ice fishing rods out there and why you need one over the other and which is best. This isn't about that. I would recommend for anyone just getting started, look for sales at your local sporting goods store, Cabela's, Canadian Tire, the Fishing Hole, wherever, and they'll sell combinations that may be right for you and the type of fish that you're targeting. You don't have to spend a lot of money. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of frostbite rods, and I have gravitated towards them for my lake trout fishing because I'm dealing with big, heavy fish that fight pretty hard. That's not necessary for everyone who's out there just getting into the sport, but those are the rods I like for that particular fish. So there's lots of options out there. I wouldn't recommend, if you're just starting, to go spend a ton of money on it. Look for those sales and get something that's suitable for your fish. Now, that being said, you need a decent line on that rod or you'll be very disappointed when that starts breaking on you, and make sure the line you have is heavy enough for the fish that you're fishing for. To go along with that fishing rod, you'll need some tackle. So I have a bag here with a bunch of containers, storage containers that I have my different lures in. You certainly don't need this many to get started, or this particular setup. You might already have some stuff that you use on open water that'll work in ice fishing as well. If you can get a few spoons, some rattle baits, some jigs, tubes, depending on what type of fish you're fishing for, that'll be sufficient. So tackle, you're going to need some hooks. Now for handling that fish, you're going to need some tools, okay? Good tools will make handling that fish a lot easier so you can remove those hooks efficiently. And if you're going to be releasing that fish, get it back in the water safely. There's various different types of tools you can get. Pistol grip needle nose pliers, more traditional style needle nose pliers. In fact, you might already have something like this in your garage that you could use in the meantime. But something good to remove those hooks is very necessary. Also, this is a jaw spreader. Sometimes with northern pike, they'll clamp down their jaws and it'll be very difficult to remove that hook in a timely manner. So these just help spread the jaws apart so you can get in there with those pliers and get the hooks out. If you're new to ice fishing, do not try to reach in a northern pike's mouth and remove the hook by hand. They got a lot of teeth and it doesn't feel good. So they like to clamp down. So just be aware of that. Too much handling of these fish can be detrimental to their health. All right, so if you're not keeping the fish, let's try to handle it safely and get it back in the water so that other people enjoy catching it. Number 4, you're on the lake, you've got your rod, you've got your tackle, you've got your fish handling tools. You're going to need some way to get through that ice. But to make that hole, you're going to need an auger. All right. This is my Alpha Ion. It's an electric auger and it's a 10-inch steel auger. Now this auger is very pricey and may not be for someone who's just getting started if you are not independently wealthy. So this is not what I would recommend for a beginner. There's options such as hand augers that require a little more strength and effort, but depending on the thickness of your ice, they may work just fine for your area. Come in a 6 or 8-inch diameter. And lots of people use those for a lot of years and they work just fine. I've graduated, I would say, to this electric auger just because I do ice fishing quite a bit. I really enjoy it, and sometimes some of this equipment can make your life just a little bit easier, and sometimes it's just fun having new equipment that's a little bit different. An electric auger is certainly different for me. But there's many two-stroke options out there as well, where you mix the gas and oil, and they work great. I've had those in the past. I've had an Eskimo propane auger in the past that I used before this one that worked really well too. I still have it. So lots of different options out there for augers. You don't need a 10-inch necessarily. You can, in many bodies of water, get away fine with an 8-inch, even a 6-inch, right? It just depends on what type of fish you're fishing for. For me, again, I get into the lake trout quite often, so it's nice having the larger hole opening. Not a must-have 10-inch. But yeah, so certainly something else you're going to need is an auger. Okay, you've got that hole dug. Now you're going to need something to clean out the slush and ice that's left in the hole. So some sort of skimmer or ice scoop. This is a very cheap, basic option, something I've had for over 20 years and has worked just fine for me. It's actually just recently needed to be fixed for the first time, and my brother welded it up for me. That had more to do with the transportation out to the lake than actually using it. But yeah, something simple like this would work just fine. Nice skimmer. Now, in the nice to have category, I've got this one, and it's a little fancier. It will remove the slush and ice in a larger amount at a time, and can be a little more efficient, but a nice to have. You don't need to have this. It took me until this year before I finally purchased one. It's nice, it helps. I wouldn't say it's end all be all for sure, like the little ice auger, the little ice scoop, this basic one I bring with me still to complement this one. This is all you really need. So along with that auger, you're going to need something to clean out that slush. Something else that I don't know if it's a nice to have, because it kind of depends on the conditions you're fishing with, an extension. It's nice to have an extension with you because you never know when that ice is going to get you know, over that 3 feet of thickness, and then an extension will certainly save your day if you come across that thicker ice in that spot you want to fish. So I fish a long way from home. I can't just run home and get my extension, so I make sure I have an extension with me at all times, just in case. Sometimes the ice thickness can vary quite a bit, even on the same body of water. Something that's maybe a little more than nice to have. All right, so you got that hole dug now, and if you're going to be out there for a while, it's nice to have a chair. So something simple, like these little 3-legged stools. This one's Cabela's brand one, very cheap. You can usually find them on sale. Fold up nice and compact, so that's nice to have. But really, you could be sitting on a bucket too. And a bucket, something to carry your rods out there, might be handy to have as well. So just turn that bucket over. Or maybe you're able to have your vehicle on the ice if the ice conditions are safe enough, and you can sit in your vehicle. You probably have a lawn chair already you could bring with you if you can get it out there. So a chair is something that's maybe a little more nice to have depending on how long you're out there, but yeah, chair. The next thing is going to be a shelter. There's a wide variety of shelters out there, and that's probably going to be one of your most expensive pieces of equipment. Again, if you're just starting out, budget accordingly, I would say, because if you're going to only go ice fishing once or twice a year, maybe you don't need the biggest, baddest tent out there. Some things I would recommend, I've tried a lot of different tents, from flip overs to hub shelters and some homemade jobbies in between. I think for most people, a hub shelter is going to be ideal, really, for transportability, ease of setup, and all that. Once you get into flip over shelters, they're usually more expensive. One thing that I would recommend for most people, I would say, in most conditions in the winter, you're going to want an insulated tent. I know in some situations you can get away with a tent that's not insulated, and it's a lot lighter to carry if you have to carry it, or if you're pulling out your toboggan by hand. But I like an insulated tent. It helps keep that wind down a lot from penetrating the tent, and obviously holds the heat in better if you're using heater. A good tent, as good as you can afford anyway, is something that might be a little more than a nice to have, especially if you're out there with your wife or spouse or kids. So a tent. Something that I've liked is the Eskimo 450 XD is what I'm using right now. It's really nice. I've used an Escape 2800 flip over. It's really nice. Again, not necessary for everybody, but yeah, there was some options for you. All right, so if you've made the effort to get a tent out onto the lake to ice fish in, you're probably in conditions that may require a heater as well. There's lots of different options for heaters. I've used several of them. One of the first heaters I ever had was kind of this sunflower style heater. and works really good, throws a lot of heat. You just screw that in the top of a propane bottle, like a 20-pound propane bottle, 10-pound, 30-pound, whatever you got, and it sits on top there like this and blows out, radiates a ton of heat. The one downside of these things is they can put a lot of carbon monoxide inside your tent, and they can be harmful if your tent is sealed up too tight or you're using them for too long. So you gotta be really cautious with these things. This one I don't really run all that much anymore. I kind of carry it with me as a backup in case of one of my other heaters failing, just because these things are kind of bulletproof. It's cheap, and it seems to just always work if the other heaters go down. So this is one option. Another option is the buddy heater. So this is the portable buddy heater, one of their smaller versions, and works pretty good when you're in a smaller shack or the conditions are not too cold. This one, you just put a 1-pound propane bottle on there, or you can run a propane line to a larger bottle. Usually you're going to need more than a 1-pound bottle, or you're going to need several of them, so I just like to bring a 20-pound bottle out with me of propane. But yeah, this is the portable buddy heater, which again doesn't throw out a ton of heat, so depending on your conditions and how large a space you're heating, you may need to bump up to something like this, the hunting buddy heater. So hunting buddy heater, a little bit larger, throws a little more heat. This is what I was using for most of this season, and it did okay. I used it for overnights when it wasn't too cold, and it, you know, had a little bit of trouble keeping up when the wind was up and it was colder out overnight in a tent about the size of an Eskimo 450 XD was what I was using. So it did all right, but you know, you still need to wear some warm clothing, and overnighters might be a little tough. But yeah, this is a decent heater probably and size for most areas and most people who are just doing day trips. Now, if it's really cold, you're gonna probably want a big buddy heater. This is gonna throw a lot more heat than the other two, and it's larger as well and gonna use more propane and be more expensive. But you can usually find these on sale from time to time, so pay attention to that. These you can get sometimes on Amazon on sale, or Cabela's will have a big sale on them as well. But this is going to be pretty sufficient for even a larger tent and pretty cold conditions. As you can see, I've broken out the one side there of the Element. Rough travel across the lake, and yeah, broke that ceramic plate. So I've got some replacements, and I need to do some repairs on this and some other heaters around here. When I'm running my propane heater, I usually have 2 hoses with me. Sometimes these hoses can get froze up. I'm traveling longer distances in some fairly cold conditions sometimes by snowmobile, and sometimes it's nice to have an extra hose just in case something goes wrong with that other one. So that might be something you want to consider, is having an extra hose if you're running your propane heater to a larger tank, like a 10 or 20-pound tank. Also, to go with that good hose, especially with these buddy heaters, you'll want a filter. That filter is going to keep some of the impurities out of the fuel line itself from getting into the heater and plugging up the lines. So word to the wise, if you're running bulk fuel to your buddy heater, get a filter. Okay, before we get into some nice to haves for ice fishing, I think one thing you really should have is a shovel. Okay, it doesn't have to be a big aluminum grain scoop like this. If you have a smaller shovel, that's probably more desirable. This is just what I had available with me close by. Generally, I run a smaller shovel. But this is really helpful when you got a lot of snow and you need to dig away the snow before you can even dig the hole with your auger. Also for moving that snow around the outside of your shack, or clearing a spot to sit inside your shack too. So a shovel can be pretty necessary equipment to have with you as well. All right, I think it's time to get into some equipment that might be a little more in the nice to have category. So some things that are nice to have is a tip up. You don't just need a rod. In fact, you could supplement a tip up for a fishing rod and just use these really. So maybe it's not nice to have, maybe it's a must have. I haven't used tip ups a ton, to be honest, but I do carry them with me and use them from time to time to dead stick for fish. In most places you fish, you're going to be allowed to have 2 lines out per fisherman. That's the way it is here in Alberta. So having a tip up is nice. There's a couple different varieties here. There's a jaw jacker variety that is much more involved, and you got some pins here to raise where the rod holder is. Got some arms that come out the side with little pins or spikes to hold it in place, and the setup on that is a little more involved than your typical tip up, but this allows you to use your ice fishing rod or one of your ice fishing rods, where this is a standalone unit and you're going to be using your hands to bring in the fish by pulling the line. So yeah, some tip ups. Definitely a nice to have, and I like having it, is just a little holder like this for your rod. So you can set your rod down and still have it held up securely, maybe prevent it from getting dragged down the hole, or at least keep your reel out of the snow and ice and all that, and keeps it ready by your side. So a rod holder like this is nice to have. Just set it down on the ground and you set your rod across here and you're good to go. Something else that if you're planning to keep fish, or you just want to know the length of the fish for your record keeping or what have you, is a good measuring tape. So this isn't a tape per se. Ooh, needs to be cleaned. It's more or less a foldable bump board. Yeah, where I fish, it's quite common to end up with lake trout that are in those 40-inch range. So you need all three leaves folded out, but where you fish, maybe you don't need something as big. Maybe a measuring tape is fine, or there are nicer bump boards out there as well that you might prefer. Again, whatever you think is right for your fishing situation, the fish you'll encounter, but I'd say it's a nice to have, something to measure a fish, especially if you're planning to keep those fish and you want to stay legal. You'll need some way to reliably measure it so you're staying within the regulations. A mallet for whacking fish. My daughter would say this is a must-have, whack it with a hammer. To go along with that measuring theme, here's another device here. It's a digital scale, or for weighing the fish. This goes into their jaw so you can hold them up, and it's a little more, it's a little less intrusive on the fish, a little more gentle, as opposed to a hook that goes under their gill plate to weigh them, which I don't know, I used to use one of those for sure. When you're trying to improve your fish handling, that's really not the best way to do it. This allows you to get a safer grip on the fish, still get your weight, and again, weighing a fish, you're not going to do that with every fish, okay? It's as you get experience, you may encounter fish that are you feel are closer to the biggest fish you've ever caught, and you might want to get that weight. So I have this in my tackle box or my bag ready to go in case I encounter a really big fish. So nice to have. You certainly do not need the weight of the fish. Regulations for the most part of any freshwater fish that you're fishing for are going to go by length. That's going to be the most important thing. Definitely a nice to have, I certainly like having it, is some sort of table to set your hooks on, set my jet boil on when I'm making coffee or something of the like. So this is just a cheap thing I found on Amazon that I used this season. It worked all right. Plastic, legs fold out, and height adjustable. Not a big deal, not going to go into it too much. I'm going to say this is a nice to have, but it's if you're traveling with kids or girls, and especially girl kids, portable toilet. I tell you what, this thing has been a lifesaver from Reliance. It's got legs that fold out here. You get these bags with an absorbent powder inside them to help kill the odor and absorb the liquids that's going into it. And this can really make the difference. Your little one's so much more comfortable when you bring them out fishing. If you're traveling with kids and you want to make it enjoyable for them, this might be a must-have. All right, something that is actually pretty necessary is some paper towel, something to clean off your hands. You're dealing with fish, they're usually a little bit slimy, your hands are getting wet and slimy and you need to clean them off, or you're cooking in the tent or whatever. Some paper towel's nice. I just ran a old metal hanger through this one and bent it up, and I just hook it on one of the supporting rods of the hub tent that I'm in, and that holds it in place and keeps it handy for me off the ground so I can unroll some paper towel whenever I need. Okay, so that's my list of must-have and some nice-to-have fishing equipment for those who are getting interested in ice fishing or already participate and want a little more gear added to their collection. Thank you for watching, and again, thank you for all your support. See you next time. Man, that sucks. Everything sucks. These kids are gonna be back soon. They're gonna be crying. They'll be crying. They're always crying.